If you wish to seek out advice regarding interpersonal relationships, you may gravitate towards Reddit's relationship advice subreddit. You write a post detailing your problem and people come flocking to your aid, eager to help. It's as if everyone thinks they have the knowledge and expertise needed to assist you. Reddit's a website where people can make an account with any username they want, making it difficult to know who is commenting and posting. In the relationship advice subreddit, posters typically state their ages and genders. However, commenters don't have this kind of requirement and rarely give any detail regarding their identity. This begs the question, who exactly is giving advice in the comments of the relationship advice subreddit? I have investigated 20 users from the relationship advice subreddit. I would have liked to investigate more, but due to the fact that there are thousands upon thousands of users commenting in the subreddit, it would be impossible for me to research all of them. They were chosen from various comments throughout the subreddit. Some of these comments are highly upvoted, some aren't. All of these users are over the age of 18. My intent is to figure out what kind of people are giving relationship advice, not to gather and compile easily identifiable information that they have posted. I also don't wish to direct people towards these users, and so I will be censoring their usernames and post titles. One more thing to note before I begin. These users are all real people with real lives, real emotions, real struggles, real families, and real histories. We may only see them as text on a screen, but behind each of their comments there is a real human being. Now let's begin. Let's start with someone who doesn't have much drama going on and doesn't have anything incredibly out of the ordinary posted to their account. I found user 1 in a comment of a post asking for advice because OP's significant other repeatedly forgot her birthday. User 1 mentioned being bad at remembering birthdays, but told OP that it's about the effort, and the OP's significant other was not putting in any effort to remember the birthday. Who is our forgetful User 1? User 1 is a female in her late 20s who recently got married to her husband and lives in Boise, Idaho. She was cautious about the number of guests at her wedding as to lower the risk of people getting sick, and also mentioned recently watching Doctor Who. She has a mild mold allergy, is clumsy, and either is currently or has been previously employed at Dairy Queen. She's active in these subreddits. User 1 is not someone who seems to be out of the ordinary. She posts on ordinary subreddits and has shared ordinary flaws that may annoy her or the ones around her, but aren't glaring red flags. She is a normal person giving normal, inoffensive, ordinary advice. Of course, I am assuming a lot. I'm assuming that what I see is all there is to her, that what she posts is who she is. But what she doesn't reveal is just as important as what she does reveal. She doesn't explicitly state her educational history, nor does she reveal her political opinions. She doesn't talk much about her interests, despite talking a lot about herself. She could simply not be interested in speaking about these matters, or she may be hiding them. It's possible that her political opinions are considered socially unacceptable by most, or that her interests are considered strange, although Doctor Who and beauty don't seem to be abnormal interests. It's possible that she doesn't wish to gloat and brag about her education level, and it's also possible that education isn't a huge part of her life. It's also interesting to note that she doesn't make posts, she only comments on them. Perhaps not talking about these topics is for privacy-related reasons, but it's difficult for me to believe that due to how much she reveals about her personal life through the retelling of very specific events from her life. Not much else to say about User 1. Let's move on. User 2 is also fairly ordinary. She's a vegetarian female of Filipino descent living in Canada. She works at Starbucks or has worked there previously. Aside from relationship advice, she's active in subreddits such as vegan, Starbucks, vegetarian, cooking for beginners, and a bunch of subreddits for video games she plays. She either currently has or previously had a boyfriend. Overall, an uninteresting person, posting about ordinary things, working at an ordinary job. I found her in this comment she made, which is nothing special. There is one thing that rubbed me the wrong way about this person though. This post she made on skincare addiction telling someone that their acne is probably hormonal acne. Luckily, the OP of that post made an appointment with a dermatologist, but why is User 2 giving medical advice? Of course, if OP's symptoms fit the description of hormonal acne, then I suppose it's not too ridiculous for User 2 to suggest that this is the problem. Perhaps this is a problem that User 2 has extensive first-hand experience with. However, User 2 also makes the assumption that OP's dermatologist may suggest birth control as a solution. It's difficult for me to find the correct words to describe what about this bothers me. Is it about the fact that she assumed what a dermatologist would recommend, despite that not being her area of expertise? Maybe. Is it about the fact that she jumped straight to birth control as a possible solution, despite the OP specifically mentioning wanting help with several products, none of which are birth control? Maybe. Is it about the fact that she jumped straight to hormonal acne as being the diagnosis, without even seeing a picture of OP's skin? Maybe. It feels like all of those are things that bother me, but it still feels like none of these are the thing that is making me feel as upset about this as I do. Compared to the first two, User 3 is far more active on Reddit and posts much more often on relationship advice and other similar subreddits. She is a 28-year-old mother living in a small town in Canada. She used to be a mortician but has left that career. She finds being a mother preferable to her previous job. User 3 doesn't believe in the idea of the one when it comes to finding a romantic partner. She also mentions flirting with her sister-in-law. She comments a lot on posts about other people's relationships, whether it's to give advice or to judge people. She does this so often to the point where it seems like a hobby for her to go through relationship subreddits and give advice. She also shares a lot about her own personal life. User 3 doesn't make posts super frequently, but does make a fair number of posts sharing her thoughts, her feelings, and things she's been going through. Sometimes her thoughts and feelings are described in comments on Ask Reddit and Ask Women rather than in posts of her own. It truly is bizarre to me how people can have such confidence as to give advice to strangers online who give one-sided accounts of their relationship issues. There's nothing wrong with giving advice online, or sharing a lot about yourself online like User 3 seems to enjoy doing. However, it's so bizarre to me that some people seem to have made doing such things a nearly daily activity. I wonder, how much of User 3's advice has helped someone? How much of it has hurt someone? Are these things that User 3 thinks about, or does she give advice for her own satisfaction rather than out of selflessness? Are the thoughts that she shares, regardless of their significance to her, impacting anyone at all, or will the people who read them simply forget about her comments minutes after reading them? This next user is most active in relationship advice, but also uses Reddit to discuss TV shows, politics, Japan, and some of her other interests. User 4's location is difficult to pinpoint. She implied that the United States is her country of residence, specifically mentioning Maine. However, she is incredibly active in Japan-related subreddits. It's possible that her home country is the US, but she is currently living in Japan. It's also possible that she currently lives in the US and has previously lived in Japan. It's also possible that she lives in the US, has never lived in Japan, and just likes commenting in Japan-related subreddits as if she lives there. A user's location isn't the most important thing in the world, but knowing where someone lives and has lived gives insight into who they are and what cultures they're a part of. Different cultures see things from different perspectives, and when giving relationship advice, these perspectives influence the type of advice given. User 4 comes off as a bit rude sometimes. Her advice is sometimes completely useless. It's sometimes legitimate advice. One interesting thing to note is that it's implied that she has ADHD. Does this affect her interpersonal relationships? If so, I wonder if it affects the kind of advice she gives to others. She also mentioned having a boyfriend, although it wasn't clear whether she currently has a boyfriend or previously had a boyfriend. I do think it's important to take note of the people giving relationship advice's relationship status. User 4 also posts about politics. While her political views aren't clear, it's obvious that she is not a Republican. I don't know what policy she supports, but in regards to US politics, User 4 doesn't support the major right-wing political party. I wonder, how many people would take relationship advice from someone who is politically opposed to them? After all, politics and morals are intertwined to an extent. User 4 is interested in media such as Twilight, Terrace House, Bones, and Survivor. Based on a comment she made about enrolling for classes, she appears to be a university student. I can't say whether or not she's a good person, or if she gives good advice, or if she has good interests. Good is subjective after all. One thing that I can say for certain though, is that User 4 posts a lot on Reddit. She must have a lot of free time. After 4 females, we finally have our first male relationship advice commenter. User 5 is a male who likes cars, video games, giving relationship advice, and judging people. He mentioned being a welder and also seems to have worked at Chick-fil-A over a year ago. He lives in Tennessee, has a girlfriend, has had reconstructive arm surgery, and describes himself as a big guy. He's been to university and sold illicit substances during his time there. His ex-girlfriend also cheated on him. His tone and interests make him seem like, for lack of a better term, a dude who acts like a dude and likes dude stuff. But one thing did stand out to me. He doesn't frequently post about politics, but this comment of his, which shows up on his profile but not the original post he commented on, states this: "Left wing and right wing. Doesn't matter, it's the same decrepit old bird that needs to be put down, and we need to start a focus on the freedom of a man, not the color or what political party he is. Interpret that how you want." User 6 is an elementary school music teacher. She's around the age of 26, lives in Houston, Texas, and is married to her husband. She enjoys video games, shares certain political beliefs with the Democratic Party, and has problems with her family, describing them as toxic. She also seems to enjoy watching various television shows. Despite being a teacher, posting about being a teacher, and commenting about being a teacher, she doesn't seem to want to continue being a teacher. She wishes she chose a different major in college, and says she has been applying for jobs outside of education. User 6 states that teachers are being walked all over and treated like garbage, implying that her dissatisfaction with the job isn't due to the students or the act of teaching a class, but with the way the US education system treats teachers. I suppose Houston isn't a great place to be if one wishes to become a teacher. One more thing I'm curious about. Does the fact that User 6 interacts with dozens of children in her day-to-day life impact her outlook on adult relationships? After all, she spends much of her time witnessing children interacting in the classroom or on a Zoom meeting. Is she the type of person who learns from the children she teaches? Doesn't matter if she does. Located in Denver, Colorado, User 7 is a 40-year-old, college-educated female who works in the field of child safety. She's incredibly knowledgeable regarding this subject and sometimes writes comments to offer her expertise. She also mentioned previously working at a cancer nonprofit. She seems to enjoy role-playing games like The Witcher and Final Fantasy XIV. Her comments indicate that she is on the left of the political spectrum. She also describes herself as fat. It's refreshing to have someone giving relationship advice who has a bit more life experience. Many people commenting on relationship advice seem to be much younger and don't have as much experience dealing with others. The average Reddit user is young, and someone in their 40s will have had over a decade more of life experience to draw from than the typical 20-something-year-old Reddit user. User 7 is also very clear about what she is knowledgeable about. She has worked in the child safety field and has worked at a cancer nonprofit. She explicitly states this, and so we know that in regards to these fields, she is highly likely to offer good advice. Also, regardless of whether or not you agree with her beliefs and opinions, it's clear that a large number of her posts are detailed, well-organized, and well-explained. User 8 is also someone over the age of 40. She is a female who lives in the southern regions of the United States and enjoys the show 90 Day Fiancé. She posts a lot in dating subreddits and implies that she is single. She also mentions having a Yorkie and being an aunt who babysits her nieces and nephews. User 8 sometimes comments about various political situations. Despite being single at an age when people are typically not, she still gives relationship and dating advice. Does her being single make her more or less qualified to give this kind of advice? On one hand, someone may want dating advice from someone who is successful at dating and maintaining a stable romantic relationship. On the other hand, learning from someone who has not had that kind of success may also give insight into unsuccessful cases. In the situation of someone like User 8, should we listen to the advice she gives or use it as advice about what not to do? Should we trust that she has reflected upon her lack of dating success and come to the correct conclusions about what went wrong, or assume when looking at her advice that she is still someone who is incapable of successfully dating? User 9 is a female with a 33 or 34-year-old husband and a toddler son. She lives somewhere in New Jersey with the Homeowners Association and enjoys gardening. She posts a lot of comments on relationship advice and relationships, offering her advice and input. I don't like this person and can't really pinpoint the exact reason she bothers me so much. I don't like the advice she gives, even if it may be decent advice. I don't like her tone, even if there is nothing wrong with it on the surface. I noticed a few posts where she made certain assumptions about the situation and the people involved, and some where she seemed to jump to conclusions. She also has issues with her own husband, saying that she's the only adult in the house. The part of the post where she states, "Apparently, I'm the POS for being reasonable and thinking of others," really rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe this is how she expresses frustration. However, I'm not sure if that is the case, or if she's on a high horse thinking she's better than the rest of her family. Maybe she is. I don't know. But what I do know is that she's having serious relationship problems. If she's unable to resolve this kind of issue with her husband, How can I trust her to give good relationship advice to others like she does multiple times a day? Maybe that's not what bothered me. Maybe it's the way she makes such judgmental comments about people she doesn't know, will never know, who she has only heard of through a Reddit post. Perhaps what bothers me is that she often takes people at face value when they describe their issues, not questioning if there is more to the situation than is being presented. Even though I can identify so many of my frustrations about User 9, I still feel like I haven't and won't be able to pinpoint and vocalize exactly what bothers me so much about her. Even though all of the previously mentioned things about her frustrate me, none of them seem like the one that bothers me so much. The next user, User 10, has several comments that give insight into who she is and how she thinks. She's a former alcoholic born in 1966 who has an adult daughter and a son. She has gotten divorced in the past, but may have remarried. User 10 grew up in Saudi Arabia and mentions currently living in Baja California, while having also previously lived in the United States. The best thing she has ever done was have children. Her political comments indicate that she holds several right-wing opinions and posts in the Ben Shapiro subreddit and the conservative subreddit. Here is a collection of comments from User 10. Here is a comment where she is being very nice to a young woman for very valid reasons. Here's another comment where she definitely understands the concept of evolution. Here she is giving fantastic relationship advice to someone. I was being sarcastic if you couldn't tell. User 10 is incredibly rude in several instances and doesn't seem to question if what she's saying is worth saying. Here is a brief exchange with another user in which she writes a strange take on evolution. Here is a reply to her evolution comment. Of course, she has several other normal comments where she expresses normal opinions, but it's important to take note of the abnormal comments she has made as well. Do these few comments disqualify her in her advice? Does someone making a few rude comments invalidate their advice? Does someone's strange take on evolution disqualify their opinions? User 10 definitely has a lot going on. After all, she was born in the 1960s, much earlier than the typical Reddit user. That definitely plays a role in shaping who User 10 is, among other things of course. She is quite an interesting person. User 11 is a 34-year-old female. She was previously married, is now divorced, and currently posts a lot in the polyamory subreddit. She also has 3 middle school-aged children. She currently works in the film industry and is also in nursing school. Despite intending to switch careers, she says she still enjoys writing scripts for the sake of creating something. Although she doesn't post often about politics, usually choosing instead to give relationship advice, she has stated that she is critical of the far left. User 11 also does what I'm doing right now, checking the comment history of Redditors and drawing conclusions about them based on what information they've shared about themselves. This person has an outlook on relationships that is certainly not considered normal by most people. Most people aren't polyamorous. Is polyamory right? Is it wrong? I'm not here to give a judgment on that topic, but I will raise this question. If someone who is strictly monogamous receives relationship advice from someone who is polyamorous, what would they think? Can a polyamorous person offer valid relationship advice to monogamous people? Would a monogamous person be turned off by an advice giver's polyamory? I'm sure that like with any demographic, some polyamorous people will give good advice to monogamous people, and some will give bad advice. But the question isn't about whether or not their advice is good. The question is, what would monogamous people think if they knew that the person giving them advice is polyamorous? And of course, different monogamous people will have different reactions, but I'm curious what the most common kinds of reactions will be. User 12 is a Florida male with a wife and 2 children. He is interested in personal computers, airsoft, the gym, the paranormal, and astral projection. He is politically conservative, his username giving his negative opinions on left-wing economic systems. Additionally, he occasionally posts on the conspiracy subreddit. His relationship advice is questionable. In this post, he simply comments, "red pill moments." How does this help the OP? It doesn't. On another post, he simply comments, "good luck." Why even bother commenting at this point? How is this advice? On another post, he says, "no wonder she treated you poorly. You have no self-respect. Why should she respect you?" Not all of this user's posts are like this, but a fair amount of them are. If he has nothing useful to say, if he has no good advice to give, if he contributes nothing to the discussion, if he's going to be rude, then why comment? I wonder what he's thinking. This next user is a stark contrast from user 12. User 13 is a female with a husband and 16-year-old child, and possibly other children as well. She's a nurse living in Minneapolis. Politically, she dislikes Donald Trump and is distressed to know that much of her family likes him. She never makes her own posts and always comments. She also either doesn't have hobbies and interests or simply doesn't use Reddit to discuss them, unlike so many of the other users on the site. This isn't what sets her apart from user 12 though. What makes her so much different from user 12 is her tone when commenting. She either uses a neutral or friendly tone when commenting, making her come off as so much more kind and caring. I would imagine that this would make a person more likely to take her advice compared to someone who is rude and callous. I can't say if her advice is good or not, but regardless, I wonder to what extent posters are influenced by user 13's kindness versus user 12's unfriendliness. User 14 doesn't reveal much about herself apart from a few things. She quit smoking, she has a boyfriend, and she hates porn. She comments in several anti-pornography subreddits, and when she gives relationship advice, she's sure to find a way to spread her anti-porn message. She's had issues with her boyfriend, including having a dead bedroom and her boyfriend watching porn. She hates porn with a passion. She occasionally posts in the Christian marriage subreddit, hinting that she may be Christian. She may also post in there because people in that subreddit may share her hatred of pornography. I'm curious if she went into her relationship with her boyfriend intending to change his already existing porn-watching habits, or if he developed those habits after they started to date. Additionally, I wonder how much of the relationship advice population would agree with her stance on this issue. User 15 is a 19-year-old male. He's a second-year student at Cornell University, studying in the School of Industrial and Labor Relations. His interests are hip-hop and stocks. He dislikes Donald Trump. He tells of a story where he was scammed, in which his parents told him not to trust the scammer, and he did anyway. His bank account was then locked. He contacted the authorities, and he learned his lesson. User 15 doesn't post much, but he is young and seemingly naive. Is he qualified to give advice? Do his age and naivety disqualify his advice? Who knows? He could be wise beyond his years, or he could be an overconfident, naive fool. User 16 is a 40-year-old male living in the United Kingdom. He likes books, Dungeons & Dragons, and BDSM. He is a child-free man in a relationship with a woman and describes himself as a jealous and possessive boyfriend. He used to work in the casino business and was also once a quiet introvert. User 16's profile picture is a selfie of himself, one of the few users who uploads a photo of themselves to use as a profile picture. He also posts regularly to the child-free subreddit. While this isn't a problem, it raises some questions regarding his posts and relationship advice. Since he's 40 and not a parent, his experience with children would come from his own childhood or any babysitting he has had to do for friends and relatives. However, many people on relationship advice make posts asking for advice with their children, which user 16 does comment on. Would these parents appreciate the perspective of a child-free person, or would they scoff at the child-free advice giver since they have never parented a child before? Is the child-free advice giver's experience as a child enough for him to give decent advice, or is his advice out of touch with the realities of parenting? Does his child-free life give him an outsider perspective, allowing him to see things that parents do right and wrong from a more detached and objective perspective, or does it instead make his advice regarding children totally useless? User 17 is another 40-year-old male. He lives in Florida with his wife and 2 sons. He likes guns and gaming. He has numerous comments regarding trans women, which I will allow you to draw your own conclusions about. User 17 also seems to have had several relationship issues. There are a few of his comments that stand out to me regarding this topic. In one, his wife left him at the store, came back around to get him, but missed him when he walked to another street. They then had a huge fight and came close to divorce. Here's another comment about his marriage. Before User 17 and his wife got married, they had a temporary breakup, after which his demeanor went from what he describes as being a doormat to being distrustful until she cut all her male friends out of her life. Those male friends were what User 17 describes as users, just trying to get with his wife, which is why he felt uncomfortable with his wife being friends with them. In another comment, he again mentioned that temporary breakup, stating that he slept with another woman when him and his wife were broken up. So many relationship issues. Some of them old, some of them new. Of course, nobody is perfect, and no relationship is perfect. Everybody has a complicated past. If you needed relationship advice, would you want user 17 giving you that advice given his own issues with his relationship? Some people will like his tougher approach. Some will think he's terrible and insensitive. But regardless of the quality of his advice, is this tougher approach better for getting through to people and making them take necessary action in their lives, or does it cause harm, making posters feel worse about themselves, leading to inaction? Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. User 18. 18-year-old female. She lives in Zurich, Switzerland, has a boyfriend, and also has social anxiety and major depressive disorder. She is currently a university student studying psychology with the goal of becoming a children's counselor and has also worked as a babysitter. I found her from a comment where she gives advice to a married individual who went to therapy and realized that the marriage was going poorly. In addition to commenting in the relationship advice subreddit, she has also given advice in the legal advice subreddit and the legal subreddit. She's an 18-year-old university student in Switzerland, and yet gives legal advice for a country she doesn't live in. At least moderators in legal advice have removed her comments, but this isn't the only legal advice subreddit she has given advice in. Why would she give legal advice as someone who isn't a lawyer, as someone who doesn't live in the country of the OP asking for legal advice, and as someone who doesn't have the required education to know the law well enough to give advice? Additionally, why would she give relationship advice to people who are drastically more experienced than her when it comes to relationships? Of course, someone being young doesn't mean that their advice is invalid. Perhaps a fresh young perspective is needed. However, would you rather take advice regarding your marriage from someone who has been in a long-term relationship or someone who is barely old enough to get married in her country? Perhaps I shouldn't be so quick to dismiss user 18, since the ideas and advice of a young person may offer a unique perspective that older adults may overlook. But perhaps she's an 18-year-old know-it-all who thinks her advice is more valuable than it actually is. Perhaps a bit of both. And maybe I'm judging her so harshly due to my annoyance with her giving legal advice rather than due to the quality of her relationship advice. Regardless, my points about user 18 are still worth thinking about. User 19 is a 28-year-old, college-educated, single, male engineer. He mentions being ugly, that he hasn't been in a relationship since 2011, and that he's a virgin. He plays mobile games, works out, does martial arts, and writes. Although I found him through a comment on a relationship advice post, he doesn't comment there very often, only occasionally. When he does comment there, he usually doesn't comment on posts of people in romantic relationships asking for advice, and usually sticks to other kinds of relationship issues. I would normally wonder what he is doing giving relationship advice despite having very limited relationship experience, but it seems that user 19 sticks to his area of expertise and doesn't seem to give advice about issues he has little experience with. Our final user, user 20, is a 35-year-old female with a boyfriend of 5 years and multiple children. She lives in the United States, used to be on drugs decades ago, plays video games, does art, used to work at Target, and is now a teacher's assistant. She also gives somewhat contradictory opinions about wearing a face mask. She also feels out of place on Reddit, claiming that she thinks opposite of a lot of people. In addition to making many comments, she also posts a lot, specifically on Ask Reddit, asking several questions for the users of that subreddit to answer. The impression I get is that she speaks her mind, regardless of whether or not people agree with her, but hopes that she can blend in and find some sense of community on the website. The question we initially set out to answer was, who exactly is giving advice in the comments of the relationship advice subreddit? I suppose we've answered that question to an extent, but our sample size was small. 20 people is only a small fraction of a percent of the population of commenters on the relationship advice subreddit. Despite this fact, these 20 people are all distinctly different from one another, with different pasts, ages, families, political views, hobbies, and speaking patterns. There are a few similarities between most of them, such as most of them not being older than the age of 50 and most of them residing in the North American continent. Again, I have to reiterate that 20 people is not a large enough sample size for me to be able to draw any concrete conclusions about the subreddit's user base as a whole. What was the point of this exercise then, if, after all that, we can't even answer the question we set out to answer? Was it to cherry-pick interesting users who comment on the subreddit and attempt to paint a picture of the subreddit's population as if these 20 users tell us anything at all about the relationship advice subreddit? No, that wasn't my intent. It's important to realize how much information anyone can draw about one user just based on their Reddit post history. I didn't look up the usernames of these 20 people on any other social media platform, just Reddit. And just on Reddit, they reveal their area of residence, information about their families, information about their careers, information about their hobbies, about their past, about their education, about their politics, about their health, and a few users even uploaded photos of themselves. It's not necessary to always be paranoid when posting online, taking care to leave no trace of one's personal life. But it's important to know that people can figure out a lot about a person without digging very deep, especially on a site like Reddit. Additionally, it's important to understand that the people giving relationship advice on Reddit come from so many different backgrounds and hold so many different opinions. Someone giving you advice may come from a different culture, or have different political opinions, or be giving advice about situations with which they have no experience. Ask yourself, who is this user? Are they here to push an ideology? Is their worldview incompatible with mine? Are they too young to have valid experience? Are they too old and out of touch to be giving advice to me? Do they have morals similar to mine? A person doesn't have to agree entirely with all of your opinions to give valid advice. Advice from people who are from completely different cultures and socio-economic situations from you may offer fresh, new perspectives and completely new solutions. However, it's important to look at their advice, knowing that this is the case, and realizing that these people may or may not be compatible with you. That was all obvious though, wasn't it? Did we really need to examine all of those people to come to these conclusions? Be wary of how much you reveal online, and every user is different. Are those really the only things we can conclude? Maybe we don't need to end on a message like that. After all, it's common sense. You know, sometimes it's just fun to dig into people's histories like this and find out everything about them. Find out what goes on in their heads. Find out what they like, who they complain about, what their problems are. Nearly everybody using social media has gone through at least one person's profile like this before, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, Reddit, or something else. After all, social media makes it so easy. It's fun. It's revealing. It's a weird and unnatural thing to do, but the internet makes this kind of activity so common. Was all of this talk of investigating the relationship advice subreddit just a setup so we could feel justified about our online stalking? Maybe so. Sometimes it's just fun to be an online stalker, isn't it?